All right, thanks for joining me this afternoon. This is our monthly webinar, Nebula webinar, sort of an introduction to Nebula. So Nebula is our cloud managed networking solution. It works with our switches, our access points, and our security gateways. So it's something that touches all of our key product lines. So I'm going to go through today and provide sort of a high level overview of Nebula and what it offers. As we go through today, use the question and answer interface in Zoom to send in questions. I will try to answer them as we go through today, but for more complex questions or for ones that come in late, I'll save those to the end. But any question that's sent in using question and answer, I will answer today. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So the idea behind Nebula and really the core design philosophy is this idea of making it simpler to deploy networks and simpler to manage your customers and their networks. So Zyxel's Nebula is not the first cloud managed networking solution, but it is the first one that was designed for the SMB space. The original pioneers in this space, Meraki, Arrowhive and others were really focused on the enterprise space. And we were able to look at what they were doing and said, hey, this is something that makes a lot of sense for the SMB space. And for the longest time, we were the only players in the SMB space. And even to this day, when it comes to cloud, we're the only ones offering a full stack solution, meaning it does more than just a couple products that is entirely free for you to use. So the core components here of Nebula is the hardware itself. So we'll talk about some of those hardware solutions as we go through. But the core component here is what we call the Nebula Control Center. This is the web interface. So basically, you're just going to a single URL, nebula.zyxel.com, you log in, and everything you want to do is done through that web page. You don't have to worry about setting up port forwards or keeping track of IP addresses and VPN connections. Everything is handled through a web browser, no matter where you are. We also do have a mobile app. It is specifically optimized for use on phones, not tablets. So if you're using a tablet, you would still use the web interface. But if you want to use your phone, you would use the mobile app. The mobile app doesn't give you access to all the features. It allows you to set up, though, some basic settings to monitor what's going on in your network, see alerts, things like that. So here we go. This is just showing you all of the different things that you need to do when you're setting up a customer's network. We won't go through all of them, but it involves things like obviously installing the equipment, needing to set up how you're going to do monitoring. Are you using SNMP? Do you need to set up syslog servers, remote access to the customer's site, etc. So the idea behind Nebula is to reduce this. So you're spending less money getting things set up and you're spending less time getting things set up. And we'll go through here when we talk more about Nebula and start talking about some of the things Nebula does for you, which are really nice. So one of the key things here is you can have a new site up and running in just a few minutes. We've got a number of default settings and wizards that are part of the Nebula interface that'll get your at least basic configuration up and going in no time. You simply create a Nebula account, log in, set up your customer, set up a site under that customer. Basically, you just name them new site or new customer, customer's name, new site, site's name, and you can start configuring things. And you can start doing that without needing to take anything out of the box. So Nebula equipment has a QR code that's on the outside of the box and on the belly label of most of the products. And you simply scan that using the mobile app, or you can manually type it into the web browser and assign it to the customer's site. And that's all you need to do before the product goes to the customer location. Once you ship this out to the customer location, you simply need to plug it in, make sure it has power and internet connection, and it'll handle everything else itself. There is nothing that you need to configure directly on the hardware unless you're using fixed IP addresses and have to use those at setup. As long as you are using any form of DHCP, at least for the initial setup, that's all you need to do is just plug them in, and you can then go in and configure in the Nebula interface the fixed IPs and convert them over. So Nebula is fully built into our Nebula compatible hardware. There is nothing else you need to do. So there is no software that needs to be loaded on a computer to interface with it. There's no system images or virtual machines that need to be run on a server somewhere. There's no cloud keys or other networking devices that coordinate communication between your device and the cloud. There's nothing that has to be configured on the device to tell it it's going to be cloud managed. It's all built in there. So each device is going to individually be able to go out to the internet connection, be able to go through a standard firewall. So basically, as long as it's allowing internet communication, web browsing, you have access. It will then reach out and talk to our cloud, and that's where you'll manage it at. So I've already said this, but again, basically anywhere you've got an internet connection and a web browser, you have access to your customers' networks. So one of the nice things here is we have guest access built in on our access points. We also have it built in on our gateways, but because it's built in the access point, your gateway doesn't need to support Captive Portal. It's built into the APs themselves. So this is very common where a lot of people out there, you're going out to one of your customers, you're upgrading their wireless network, but they've already got a firewall or router that was provided to them by their ISP or that they bought previously. So they don't need to worry about what their gateway is. You can still provide guest access with Captive Portal on the access points. And there's a lot of flexibility with how that works. We have the ability with our Captive Portal to just simply have them agree to a terms of service to get out to the internet. We can have them log in with a username and password. We can have them register their own username and password to get out onto the internet. We can have them log in with Facebook. And the Captive Portal itself is pretty basic, but you can go into the Nebula interface and change things around. We've got a simple editor that's part of the Nebula interface. For those of you that want to do something more complex, we allow you to download the HTML and CSS files, customize them to your heart's content, and then re-upload them into Nebula. So you get a lot of flexibility with how that Captive Portal looks. And then, of course, always you can just point it to your own server to handle the Captive Portal, and we'll give you the code to integrate into your website to make that work. So on the wireless side of things, all of our access points support smart mesh. So you don't need a physical Ethernet connection for each one of your access points. You can use our access points, just provide them power, and they will connect to other access points. We also have the ability to turn on the smart function, which basically sees that if for some reason an Ethernet connection to your access point goes down, the access point will automatically switch into mesh mode and try to find a nearby access point that still has a physical connection on it. We support, of course, standard security, WPA2, WPA3, both pre-shared key and using 802.1x or radius authentication. So each user has their own username and password. And we support all the industry standards for fast, smart roaming. So on the switch side of things with Nebula, we still have access to our intelligent PoE. That's that technology in our switches, which frees up extra power budget. So you can power more devices than you traditionally could with the same power budget. We have basically user-friendly way to set up ACL rules, VLAN configurations. You can do loop guard, you can do DHCP server guard, etc. And all of our switches virtually stack. So you can go in and select ports on multiple switches and then configure them all at the same time. All configuration, all updates is done through the cloud. You don't need to go on site. You don't need remote access to the site. You don't need a VPN. You simply log into the web interface, make your changes, and they will be pushed out over the cloud. And that includes things like firmware updates and stuff like that. On the security side of things, you can use Nebula to manage our security appliances. Now, I will just warn you that some of the features are missing in Nebula that you would normally see when you're using those devices in standalone. So depending on what you're doing, you may or may not want your gateway to be in Nebula, but you do have the option. So with Nebula, it makes it really easy to do site-to-site VPN connections between different sites being managed with Nebula. You simply tell Nebula which sites you want to VPN together, what topology you want to use, and Nebula will configure everything else. We also make it really easy to do L2TP over IPsec. So you can use the built-in VPN clients and mobile devices to connect back into Nebula, and we can email out a script that'll automatically handle the configuration. And that works with Windows, it works with Apple OS, and it works with iOS. Does not work with Android, unfortunately. There's just too many variations on implementations on Android. So Nebula was designed from the ground up with the idea that you've got a lot of customers and they may or may not have a lot of networks. So we put all of your customers, all of their networks in one interface for you. So when you log in, you will choose your customer. It's what we call an org in Nebula terminology, and it'll take you to this page here. You can see here we've got Google Maps integration. So if they have multiple sites, you can place those sites on Google Maps just to give you a visual representation of which site is where. And then we give you a snapshot letting you know what's going on the individual sites that that customer has. And then you simply go in and choose the site you want to configure or look more deeply into, and it takes you over to this dashboard here. So this dashboard is filled up with widgets here, which show you various things that are going on in your network. These are customizable, so you can choose which modules you're looking at the dashboard, but it can show you things like how many users are on the wireless network, how much PoE is being currently used versus the budget on the switches that you have. And if you're using a Nebula managed gateway, it can give you all sorts of detail about individual users and applications that users are using on the network and what they're doing as far as terms of bandwidth and things like that. So up here at the top of the page, I don't know if you can see it, there are two simple drop-down menus. One of them is a list of your customers. You choose the customer. The other one is a list of the sites. Once you've chosen that customer, you choose the site and it'll automatically take you over there. So it's really quick to be able to jump between sites or jump between customers. And then configuration of all your equipment is done using this menu over here. So we've got stuff broken out, site-wide stuff, access point settings, switch settings, security settings, etc. So here's an example of what happens if you drill into the access points. This is the status screen, so it'll show you what's going on your wireless network. So you can see here, you get a list of all of the users, and you get a chart up here showing you bandwidth utilization over time. Now the columns that are shown here, these are all fully customizable. So you can customize that. So it's just showing you the information you want to see, but it'll show you stuff like, are they currently online or not? Which SSID are they connected to? Which physical access point are they connected to? If they are connected, what band are they on? How strong is the signal at the access point? Is the access point able to hear them? Does it have a good, strong connection? Things like security, the brand of NIC card that they're using, et cetera. So you get a lot of information there that you can drill down into. Similarly, over on the switch side of things, we give you a visual representation up here at the top of the page. So you can quickly figure out what's going on that switch, which ports have something plugged into them, what speed those devices that are plugged in. So you can see, is it a gigabit connection or is the device plugged in a 100 megabit device? And you can see if that port is currently providing PoE power. So just a quick, easy way to see what's going on the switch. And then again, just like with the access points, we have the ability to chart utilization over time. When it comes to configuring your switch ports, you simply go in, you choose the ports you want to configure, and then it'll pull up this screen here where it's got everything on it. So you can make changes across multiple ports at the same time, but all your key settings are there for you. Your VLAN settings, whether PoE is enabled, whether you're using any sort of ACL or protection on those ports, etc. So everything I've talked about up to this point is free. So Nebula is 100% free. There is no limitation to the number of devices you can manage with the free version of Nebula. There is no limitation to the number of customers you can manage with the free version of Nebula. And all of the basic core features of those devices are available in the free version of Nebula. So that's something that sets us apart from most of our competition. We do have optional licenses which unlock additional features, and I will go through those here in a few minutes. And there's a lot of them, but again, I forget the numbers now. We have run the results, but the vast majority of our customers are using the free version of Nebula. There is no, requirement that you use one of the optional upgrades, but they are there for you for those of you that want them. So when Nebula first launched, we did it similar to how Cisco handles Meraki. If you wanted cloud management, you bought specific cloud managed devices. If you wanted a standalone device, you bought this traditional standalone device, and the two did not mix. So that may work for enterprise, but we found, that does not work in the SMB space. So we've modified things and introduced what's called Nebula Flex. So any device that calls itself Nebula Flex, which is the majority of our devices these days, has the ability to be managed in the traditional way where you log into it via a GUI or a command line, you use SNMP, etc., or has the ability to manage the device in the cloud. So if it's Nebula Flex, you have your choice, cloud management or non-cloud management. So you will find that across our devices. So if you're looking for Nebula management, we've got that. It's also helpful if you've got customers, some customers are cool with cloud. Some customers are still kind of paranoid about trusting the cloud. So you can standardize on the same equipment for all of your customers, regardless of whether you're going to manage that particular customer in the cloud. You will see some products called Nebula Flex Pro. So if you look at our price list, we should say Nebula Flex or Nebula Flex Pro on most products to help you figure out what is what. But Nebula Flex Pro for most products just means it includes 1 year of the optional Pro Pack license. You don't have to use it, but it is bundled with the product. And in the case of our access points, it also means that device can be managed with a local controller. So if you want AP management, but you don't want to use the cloud, but you don't want to manage them all directly, you can buy a Nebula Flex Pro product and then use it with one of our local wireless LAN controllers. It's just a high-level overview here. Products that support Nebula Flex. On the business side of things, it's basically everything that starts with a 1 or a 2 as the first digit. So NWA 110AX, NWA 210AX, 1123AC HD, etc. It also works with our prosumer products, like our Amazon exclusive NWA 50 or NWA 55, the NWA 90AX. Those are all Nebula Flex products. On the switches, it is our GS 1920 V2 series, our new GS 1950 series, and the 1930 series switches. And then on our security gateways, it's our USG Flex series. For Nebula Flex Pro, it's basically all of our business APs that start with the number 5 or the number 6. So WAC 510D, WAC 6503, etc. Switches, it is our 1350 series switches, our 2220 series switches, and our XS 3800. And then on the security gateways, any USG Flex you buy that is bundled with the UTM licenses is also bundled with a Nebula license. And then the ATP series out of the box also supports 1 year of Nebula Flex Pro. And then when you buy the ATP series, anytime you renew the gold license, it includes a year of Nebula. Okay, so now we'll start talking about Nebula licensing. So again, the core functionality of Nebula is available for free. We call that the base pack. Then we offer 2 additional tiers that you can buy licenses for, the Plus Pack and the Pro Pack. So these unlock some additional features and we'll go through those. The Plus Pack, we originally just had the base and the Pro. And then we introduced the Plus to compete with some of the lower tier SMB management platforms like Netgear's Insight or TP-Link. So it's a cheaper solution that's more aligned with those, where the Pro Pack is, a more core MSP focused feature set. So the key thing here when it comes to licensing is, in order to upgrade from the free version to Plus or Pro, every device in that organization must have a valid active license. So if you've got 32 devices on the network, it will not turn into a Plus or Pro Pack until you've added 32 Plus or Pro licenses and assigned them to the devices. In addition, if one of those devices is expiring before the rest, once it has expired, you will fall back to the free version until you add in a license for it. And you are given a 15-day grace period after expiration. So if you've got to go back to your customer and talk to them, or you're just busy and don't get around to it, you are sent emails letting you know, hey, this organization, the license is expiring. It's going to drop back to free if you don't hurry up and add a license to it. So you are notified. So now let's go through some of the features and the differences here between them. So all of them give you access to our cloud interface. All of them give you access to our zero-touch deployment. All of them give you access to over-the-air firmware and firmware scheduling. All of them work with our mobile app. So where we start running into some differences here is when it comes to the logs. The free version of Nebula only keeps a year's worth of logs in the cloud. Now we do support syslogs, so you can always export those to your own syslog server. But as far as us hosting the logs, we only keep 24 hours in the cloud. The Plus Pack license keeps a week's worth of information in the cloud, and Pro Pack keeps a year's worth of logs stored in the cloud for you. When it comes to admin accounts, the free version of Nebula gives you 5 admin accounts for each one of your customers, whether you're using that all for your own employees or whether you're sharing that with your customers, giving them maybe read-only view so they can see what's going on. So you get 5. Plus Pack gives you 8 admin accounts per customer, and then Pro Pack, there is no limit. We also maintain in Nebula a cloud-hosted authentication database. So this can take the place of Radius if you don't want to set up your own Radius server. This is also what you would use for MAC filtering if you choose to do that. So the free version of Nebula only gives you 50 entries into the cloud database. The Plus Pack gives you 100, and then Pro Pack is no limit. And then again, the core features are provided even in the free version, so you can set up SSID, PoE, firewall rules, etc. 802.1x authentication, MAC filtering is allowed with all versions. All versions include captive portal. So now where we start getting into features that do require a license, advanced firmware scheduling. That requires a Plus or Pro Pack license. Now, again, the free version does let you schedule when you do firmware updates. Plus and Pro Pack let you get really crazy with your configuration. So you can configure individual devices on individual schedules. You can schedule different classes of devices on different schedules, etc. Plus and Pro Pack give you access to advanced reporting features. So you can set up Nebula to automatically email you certain reports at certain times. So you can do that with Plus and Pro Pack. We also give you the ability to add your logo to those reports. So you can send them, for instance, to your customers. So you can show them what's going on the network with your branding included. We have an automatic network topology view where we'll basically map out visually where the different devices on your network are, which devices they're connected to. So again, Plus and Pro Pack features. Email alerts and push notifications require a Plus or Pro Pack. So for instance, we can email you to let you know when a device has gone offline or a site or customer has become unreachable. When it comes to the captive portal, we have the ability to use Wi-Fi vouchers. Basically, we generate a username and password for users that are assigned a specific period of time. So you use those primarily in things like small public hotspots, like a cafe or something like that. So those are a Plus or Pro Pack feature. And then the rest of the stuff we're going to talk about here is Pro Pack features, and this is mainly aimed at MSPs. Gives you access to audit logs. So every configuration change is logged, including who made the changes to help you troubleshoot things in the future. The ability to sync some settings between different sites in your customer's organization, as well as the ability to clone and create templates. The ability to back up and restore switch configurations. The ability to open a ticket directly with our headquarters in Taiwan. You can do that with the Pro Pack, so you don't have to call into our local office first. We give you access to advanced AAA features. So that gives you things like dynamic pre-shared keys, Facebook Wi-Fi, which is different than Facebook login, which is included with free. The ability to use Radius server attributes to assign VLANs based on the username and password, other things like that. Advanced Wi-Fi control, including the ability for us to use artificial intelligence to automatically tweak your Wi-Fi settings when we see that users are having some issues. advanced IGMP snooping and some IPTV reports, the ability to use surveillance switch features, and some other stuff here on the VPN side of things. So those are your differences between the different licenses. The ProPack licenses run about $30 per year per device. So, significantly cheaper than, Meraki and some of the other vendors that are out there. So here's an idea. Here's the example of one of a ProPack report. This is that the advanced AP troubleshooting here. So you can see we're able to map out over time the quality of connections from each different user. So you can see, what's going on. And then we have the ability to automatically in the background be able to make changes to, channels being used, power output, roaming settings, et cetera, to try to solve any issues that we automatically detect. If you're doing IPTV, we've got some automatic reports that we generate, as well as some AI that will help identify issues you may be running into and provide suggestions for which settings we think you should change to solve those issues. Here is that automatic topology view where we map out which devices are plugged into which other devices. Again, primarily used as a helpful tool if you need to troubleshoot some issues on the network. So that's it as far as the Nebula themselves licenses go, or device licenses go. We do also have another license called the MSP pack. So while the Plus and Pro pack are assigned to devices in an organization, the MSP license is assigned to an admin account. So it unlocks these features for every organization that admin account is currently managing or has access to through that admin account. So if you have multiple admin accounts and you want all of them to have access to these features, each admin account needs to have one of these MSP licenses. So one of the main features this license gives you, and there's no limit to the number of customers or sites that you're managing with this. It's just anything that account has access to, it'll unlock these features for you. So the main one here is what's called the MSP view. It gives you a list of all of the customers that you are currently managing, lets you know whether that customer is using the free version of Nebula, Plus version of Nebula, Pro version of Nebula. And if they are using one of the paid versions, has it recently expired? Is that an org that you may need to run into and add a license to real quick? It'll show you the expiration date of when that organization is going to fall out of licensing, if it is a licensed one, show you how many sites are there, how many devices are currently online, offline, et cetera. So it's just a nice high-level overview of what's going on to all of your customers. Some of the other features it unlocks for you is it unlocks the ability to rebrand the Nebula interface with your company's logo and to replace our support contact information with your support contact information. So if you're an MSP and you don't want your customers, and you are giving your customers access to be able to log in and see what's going on in the networks, or giving them access to make some configuration changes on their own, they can see your branding there every time they log in. We've also added the ability with the MSP pack to be able to create admin teams. So admin teams allows you basically to group admin accounts together and makes it much simpler to add or remove individual admins from multiple sites or customers simultaneously. So again, if you're an MSP and you've got a lot of different people who may be logging in as admins, a lot of different techs, people are turning over, people are coming and going, it makes it a lot easier to manage that. If you just got a handful of admins, it probably doesn't make much difference. And then probably the coolest feature with the MSP thing is it does give you email and push alerts for all of your customers, even those using the free version of Nebula. So if that's the only feature you're missing from Nebula, is you just want those email alerts, you don't have to upgrade everybody to Plus or Pro. You can simply buy one MSP license and it'll do it for you. Okay, and now we'll talk about individual security licenses. So these are kind of independent from Nebula. These are licenses for additional services that we offer on our security products. So primarily these are what we call UTM, right? Unified Threat Management. These are those firewall hosted antivirus, content filtering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're using our NSG series security gateways still, the licenses that you buy to unlock those UTM services is called the NSS security pack. If you are using the USG Flex as your gateway and you want to unlock these UTM features, you buy the UTM security pack. And if you're using the ATP, you buy the gold license, and that ATP gold license works whether you're using Nebula or not. And then we also have kind of a cool feature here called Secure Wi-Fi, which has its own licensing. So Secure Wi-Fi makes it really easy to do sort of a drop-in VPN for remote users. And what it does is it essentially turns one of these Nebula managed access points into a remote VPN gateway. Right, so that's always one of the challenges with remote workers, or maybe you're just at a temporary site doing, helping, roll out cabling and do that initial network install. So rather than having to, configure software on each individual person's computer, or sending out a VPN appliance and then having to worry about double natting between whatever their existing gateway is, you simply give them an access point that has been assigned using this secure Wi-Fi. And basically that access point has an SSID that anyone who connects to that SSID automatically has a VPN tunnel back to a USG Flex or ATP back at the main office. So you have access to all of your local resources wherever you are, as long as you're connected to one of our secure Wi-Fi APs. Now, obviously, you don't want the kids getting onto that SSID or other people that may be at that location. So that SSID is protected using 802.1x. So you do have to authenticate with a username and password. And you can also use two-factor authentication to make sure those connecting to that SSID should be connecting to it. But it's a really easy way to be able to provide essentially remote VPN without having to mess with the typical hassles of setting up VPNs. And then lastly, we rolled something out earlier this year called Connect and Protect. So this is essentially a UTM type service that operates on our access points. So you say, Sean, why do we want that? And the answer again is oftentimes you're going out to a customer and their router, where you would normally have UTM services hosted on, is something that was provided by their ISP, another vendor, or maybe it's just a situation where they just don't want to pay out, hundreds of dollars for a new router that has the UTM services on it. They're happy with whatever's there. So this allows you to provide UTM type protection to your wireless users. It's not as in-depth as a gateway-based UTM solution, but it does provide, using IP reputational filters, protection from spam, scanners, phishing sites, etc. Excuse me, to sneeze there. So this is something that you can turn on. Now, unlike the standard Nebula licenses, right, the Plus and Pro Pack, every device has to have a license. With these Connect and Protect licenses, it's on a per device basis. So you can only put it, for instance, on maybe APs where your salespeople are going to be connected, but not APs that are just talking to scanners out in the warehouse. So basically each AP that gets a license, you have the ability to turn on this functionality. It does not have to be all of them at once. So the standard Connect and Protect license works on our 1123 ACV3, the WAC 500 and the WAC 500H. We also have a Connect and Protect Plus license, which in addition to that IP-based UTM services, also allows you to do application-based bandwidth throttling. So you can make bandwidth rules for individual applications, right? You can maybe throttle their YouTube or their Netflix. So it's fast enough to support, say, a 480p stream, but specifically block them from streaming 1080p or 4K to save bandwidth for other users. So those licenses work on the NWA 110AX, 210AX, the 510D, the 610D, the 630S, and the 650S. Basically, all of our professional business grade Wi-Fi 6 APs, but not the Wi-Fi 6E APs that we recently launched. And that, guys, pretty much ends today's presentation. Thank you for putting up with me through all of this. If this is something you're interested in and you haven't played around with it yet, you can simply go to nebula.zyxel.com, click Get Started, and we do have a button on that page that allows you to log in to a demo site so you can play around with it there. If you are one of our partners, you are part of our partner program, you can reach out to your Zyxel salesperson and they can hook you up with a 60-day demo kit so we can give you some hardware to put in your lab to play with. Again, if you have any questions, send them in using the question and answer box. While I wait for questions to come in, because none have come in, just to remind you, most of our webinars are recorded and are uploaded to YouTube. So you can find those. There's lots of different Zyxel channels and videos on YouTube. So look for Zyxel America channel. That is stuff that is put out by our North American office. So you'll find recordings of most of our webinars. You will find video case studies that we have done. You will find other materials, guides, and things like that that we put on that YouTube channel for you. And of course, we're on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect to us there on LinkedIn as Zyxel US channel. And my email is Sean R. Sean is spelled S-H-A-W-N. So Sean R at Zyxel.com. Feel free to reach out to me directly. Or of course, feedback can always be provided to your salesperson and they'll pass it on to me. I have not seen any questions come in, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If there was something you wanted to ask me, just email me directly or email your salesperson. Thanks for joining us, guys. We've got some more webinars coming up this month. Hope we see you at some of those.